There are kinds of exhaustion that never show on your face. They just stay quietly inside, as if they have become a part of who you are. I used to think I just needed a few days off, that this job would pass, as long as I pushed through a little more. But time after time, I found myself completely drained. Not just because of the work, but because of how I treated myself while doing it. I changed workplaces, changed managers, changed roles, always believing the next time would be different. But no, I was still the same person who always took on the hardest tasks. Still the person who could not say no. Still the one who stayed silent, waiting for someone to finally acknowledge me. And then, one late evening, when everyone had gone home and the room was left with just the light of the computer and me, I sat there, hands still typing, but my heart completely empty. I asked myself, why does this keep happening? Is there something within me that keeps choosing the same pain, just in a different shape? If you have ever seen yourself in that same cycle, always pushing, always enduring, always believing that I have to be strong, then maybe, just maybe, you are not alone. I used to believe that all I needed was to find the right place to belong. I called it a positive choice, my way of protecting myself. And I always carried hope that next time, it would be different. At first, it often felt that way. The new environment helped me forget the old feelings. The smiles, the greetings, the way people welcomed me warmly. It all felt like stepping into a completely new chapter. I felt that spark again, the desire to contribute, to do well, to prove that I deserved this new opportunity. But quietly, something familiar would always return. I started staying late again, started bringing work home, started waking up in the middle of the night with a long to-do list spinning in my mind. And eventually, I would feel just as tired as before, even though everything around me had changed. I realized the only thing that stayed the same through all those fresh starts was me. And that was when I had to be honest with myself. Maybe it is not the job that is burning me out. It is how I live inside the job. That is what wears me down every single day. I used to blame the environment, the company culture, the nature of the work. But after going through the same outcome in different places, I had to stop and ask myself, why does this keep happening, even when the outside world has changed? That question was not easy to sit with. It forced me to face myself. No more room to avoid or make excuses. I began to observe, why do I always feel like I need to try harder than others just to be recognized? Why do I feel guilty for taking a day off, even when I am utterly exhausted? Why is the only compliment that brings me comfort? You work so hard? I realized that deep inside, I carried an unspoken belief that I only have value when I am doing something. That to be loved, I have to prove myself. That resting is lazy. That saying no is selfish. And those beliefs, not the job, are what keep leading me back to the same path, just under different names. I was not really searching for a new job. I was walking in a circle of my own making, a circle drawn by old beliefs, unhealed wounds, and a part of myself that never once got asked, "Are you tired?" I started looking back on the past, not to blame anyone, but to understand myself. Because it turns out, many things I thought were just my personality were really just the coping mechanisms I had learned to survive. I grew up in a family full of love, but it often came with conditions. I was praised when I got good grades, when I helped around the house, when I behaved and did not complain. When I was tired, when I cried, when I showed weakness, it was often seen as annoying. So I learned to stay silent, learned to hide what I really needed, learned to try, not because it made me happy, but because I was afraid I would be abandoned if I was no longer useful. From a very young age, I believed, if I wanted to be loved, I had to earn it. And so, over time, I became someone who always carried the load, always ready to do more, always placing myself last. I used to call it a sense of responsibility, but in truth, it was fear of rejection, beautifully disguised. When I stepped into work, I did not just bring my resume and experience. I brought along the child inside me, always trying so hard just to be seen and acknowledged. But the price I paid was slowly drifting further and further away from myself. I no longer recognized where my physical limits were, or what my real emotions felt like. I did not know how to rest without feeling guilty. I did not know how to work without pushing myself too hard. And worst of all, I began to believe that this was the only way I knew how to live. That if I stopped trying so hard, I would have nothing left to hold on to. That no one would need me. No one would choose me. Not if I was no longer capable, no longer strong. I remember that night very clearly. I was sitting alone in the office, like always, later than everyone else, with the light casting down on a desk cluttered with papers. I opened my laptop, typed a few lines, and then stopped. I just sat there, not because I was tired, but because I felt completely empty. I had no ideas left, no feelings left, no motivation to push through just a little more. And in that quiet moment, a question rose in my mind, so clear it gave me chills. How exhausted do you have to be before you allow yourself to stop? I broke down in tears, not because of pressure, but because for the first time I felt compassion for myself. I had been pushing myself into races no one asked me to run, choosing sacrifice, then feeling bitter when no one recognized it. I had lived as if there was only one way to exist: do more, endure better, and never be a burden. But the truth is, I was just too tired, not from the work itself, but from constantly pretending to be okay. And I started asking myself, if I stop trying so hard, what is left of me? If I stop holding it all together, who will still stay? If I begin to live for myself and not for the expectations of others, what will happen? I did not have the answers right away, but I knew that, for the first time, I stopped not because I collapsed, but because I wanted to listen to myself. I used to think that in order to break out of the cycle of burnout, I needed a dramatic breakthrough, a bold action, like quitting my job, moving somewhere new, starting over from zero. But then I realized, not all change begins with a big door slamming shut. Sometimes, it starts with a moment of silence and a very small choice. I did not leave right away. I stayed in the same job for a while longer. But this time, I chose to stay with awareness. I started to observe myself when I felt the urge to take on more work. I realized that each time I was about to say yes, what echoed inside me was fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being left behind, fear of not being good enough. And instead of acting on that reflex, I paused to listen. I began to practice saying no, not as a bold statement, but as a way to save my own breath. I practiced shutting down my computer when the work was done, instead of staying late to finish just one more thing. I sat down and ate lunch slowly, instead of chewing quickly while typing like I used to. These things may sound small, but to me, they felt like signals I was sending to myself. You, too, deserve to be cared for. Of course, there are still days when I forget, when I fall back into old patterns, when I do not even realize I am pushing again. But the difference now is, I know how to stop sooner, know how to come back to myself more gently. I no longer blame myself for relapsing. I simply place my hand over my heart, take a deep breath, and remind myself, it is okay. I am still learning. Change is not something you do once and it is done. It is more like a dance, sometimes stepping forward, sometimes back, but always in the direction of awareness. And every time I make a different choice, no matter how small, I am slowly breaking free from the same old path, stepping into a new one, where I no longer need to be completely drained just to feel like I matter. If in this story you see a part of yourself, someone who once held it all in so they would not be left behind, who tried so hard they lost themselves, then please pause for a moment and breathe. The things that keep repeating are not here to hurt you. They return to remind you that there is still something inside, waiting to be understood and embraced with tenderness. You do not have to be drained to be seen. You do not have to hold it all together to be loved. You are worthy, even when all you do is simply exist, honestly and fully. If today you can only do one thing for yourself, then let it be choosing something a little gentler. Sometimes, just one small step inward is enough to change your whole path.